All right. So can anybody tell me what the theme of our week has been here for Sukkot? Walk by faith. Great. Awesome. We're learning well. That's wonderful to see and hear. Walk by faith. And last time that we shared on Thursday, we went through and discussed Abraham. And today we're going to discuss another powerful man of faith, that being Moses. Moses is called in the scriptures the most humblest of men. The most humblest of men. I don't know a lot of people in the secular world who would think that is a great title, but the scriptures says that is a magnificent title, and therefore shows the divergence between our culture and our world and what God looks at and deems worthy. If we look through the story in the Torah of Moses and the different circumstances in his life, we are brought to many different stories that deal with faith of Moses and his humility. We can compare it to him to Korah. Korah's arrogance to say, you know what, I should be the man in charge, not you, Moses. Or how about Miriam and Aaron? You know, we're the same line as you. Why can't we do all the gifts and talk to God? I think we should be the ones capable of doing that. Or even the times of, as he's called the most humblest man, compared to striking the rock, or the situation where he loses his temper. Or how about, as we talked about or were shared with in song today, Jethro coming to him and saying, hey, you should do this. And Moses didn't go, I don't need to listen to you. I know what I'm doing. No, he was humble, and he accepted that offering of knowledge and advice from his father-in-law. So we look and see that Moses' trusting, or his faith, led him not to be right, but to fall on his face for forgiveness for those who acted in ways in opposition to humility and to God. So I want to look at three things kind of today that are talked about with Moses. Number one, he faithfully went before Pharaoh and how that impacted his life. Two, he faithfully went to Jehovah when he needed provisions. I say four things. Three, he listened to the advice of others. And four, he loved people more than himself. First thing we looked at there is he faithfully went before Pharaoh. Now, many of you probably know that early on in the story of Moses, that Moses was not a person who was wanting to do what God told him to do. But when we look through the story of his life, we see that he was willing as his life went on. So looking at Hebrews chapter 11, verses 24 through 26. Hebrews 11, 24 through 26, as we're kind of using Hebrews 11 as the backbone of all of our study this week. It says, by faith Moses, when he became of age, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin, esteeming the reproach of Messiah greater riches than the treasures in heaven, for he looked to the reward. So if we understand that Moses was growing up in the wealth of Egypt, he had all of the pomp and circumstance of Pharaoh's household. He had been adopted by Pharaoh. He probably wouldn't have been Pharaoh's heir to the throne because he had a son, but he would have been probably the second in command, like Joseph, in all of Egypt for his entire life. He would have been, like, say, the grand vizier, so to speak, of Egypt. So he would have had all the wealth the world would imagine, all the power the world would imagine. And yet, his heart yearned for his people. And I don't think that when he first had this contact with this yearning inside of him that he understood what it was. I think that he thought he could go out and deal with things on his own, and that's when he killed the Egyptian slave masters, and he thought he was protecting one of his own, and everybody would come to him and be excited, but that didn't happen, did it? Instead, it led him to become an outcast out in the lands of Midian, in the desert, in the wilderness. From that time frame, 40 years went by in the wilderness of Moses' life. And when God first confronted him, it wasn't a man who was mighty and strong or powerful and wanted to go and kill all the Egyptians. It was a timid and scared individual. In Exodus chapter 3, verses 11, it says, "But Moses said to God, 'Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and that I should bring the children of Israel out of Egypt?'" What a change in temperament from what he did back when he was in Pharaoh's household and killing a man to now where God says, "You're going to go and lead my people." And instead he's like, "Who am I? Who am I?" And I don't think this was yet humility being spoken of here. This was not a humble, like, "Father, I'm nobody. Here I'm going to fall on my knees before you." No, this was "I'm worthless. I've been out here for 40 years tending sheep. That's the only thing I'm good at anymore." Sigh. That's the kind of situation that we're looking at in this section. In verse 13 of verse 3, or chapter 3, it says, "Then Moses said to God, 'Indeed, when I come to the children of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them?'" But here we see Moses, he's like, who am I that they're going to listen to me? And so you say you're the God of your people and my people, but I don't know who you really are. What do I tell them that you are? In Exodus chapter 4, verse 1, "Then Moses answered and said, 'But suppose they will not believe me or listen to my voice. Suppose they say, Jehovah has not appeared to you.'" Again, challenging and questioning God and saying, I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do this. Verse 10 of chapter 4, "Then Moses said to Jehovah, 'O my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither before nor since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. I'm a blathering idiot. Why are you looking at me to lead your people?'" That's basically what he's saying there. Has anybody ever said that to God? "I'm a blathering idiot. I can't do anything, God." Maybe not those words, right? Like Bill was saying yesterday, is wackadoodles. The acorns are falling. But we may not come and say it that way about ourselves personally, but have we ever gone before Yah? Have you ever gone before Yah and said, "I am not capable of doing what you're asking me to do"? I think we probably all have. We all suffer with a lack of courage to do what God desires of us to do. Exodus chapter 4, 12 and 13, the same chapter. "Now therefore go, and I will be with you, with your mouth, and teach you what you shall say." But Moses said, "Oh, my Lord, please send by the hand of whoever else you may send. I don't care who it is, the bum down the street, but just not me, God, I'm not worthy, and I can't do this." So we see here Moses starting scared. He's not the man of God. He's not the most humble man in the world. He's not a man of faith that Hebrews chapter 11 talks to him about. But God starts and begins to build on the man. He builds a little bit of a foundation, then a little bit more, and then a little bit of structure, and a little bit more structure, eventually a roof, and good shingles and all that stuff come into play. And before long, there's a man of faith that's built out of nothing. And so the next thing we see about Moses is he was bold even though he didn't have it in him. He was bold even though he didn't have it in him. And I'm going to go through just a lot of verses real fast, but just kind of bear with me as I do this. When we look at the storyline here of the next several chapters in the Exodus, we see that in Exodus 4, at first it was Aaron that was speaking, because remember, he's dumb and mute and can't stop speaking, he stutters and all that stuff. So it says there in Exodus 4, verses 27 through 30, and Jehovah said to Aaron, "Go into the wilderness to meet Moses." So he went and met him on the mountain of God and kissed him. So Moses told Aaron all the words Jehovah who had sent all the words of Jehovah who had sent him, and all the signs which he had commanded him. Then Moses and Aaron went and gathered together all the elders of the children of Israel, and Aaron spoke all the words which Jehovah had spoken to Moses. So who's doing the speaking in this section? Not Moses, right? It's Aaron who's the mouthpiece at this point in time. Then he did the signs in the sight of the people. So Aaron's doing the speaking, Aaron's doing the miracles in front of God's people. All right? Moses is, I can just imagine, here's Aaron, he's doing everything, and Moses is sitting back there. You know, don't look at me, kind of a thing. Moses learned to be bold, though. Moses learned the process of being bold. If we go a little bit further on to Exodus chapter 6, and verses 1 and 2, it says, "Then Jehovah said to Moses, 'Now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh. For with a strong hand he will let them go, and with a strong hand he will drive them out of the land.' And God spoke to Moses and said to him, 'I am Jehovah. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as God Almighty. But by my name Jehovah I was not known to them.'" And you go drop down to verse 12, though. And it says, "And Moses spoke before Jehovah, saying, 'The children of Israel have not heeded me. How then shall Pharaoh heed me? For I am of uncircumcised lips.'" So again, still the one who's not ready to go and be the servant of God. But that's not the end of the story. If we drop down to 29 and 30 of Exodus chapter 6, it says, "Jehovah spoke to Moses, saying, 'I am Jehovah. Speak to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, all that I say to you.' But Moses said before Jehovah, 'Behold, I am uncircumcised. I have uncircumcised lips, and how shall Pharaoh heed me?'" Still not learning, is he? But wait, Jehovah doesn't leave him in that state, does he? You know, we look around here. God's made us a very diverse group. We have a lot of diverse talents and gifts that God has given us. We are different body parts. Not everybody's supposed to be the eloquent speaker. Not everybody's supposed to be the behind-the-scenes person. Not everybody's the technology guy, the music guy, the food guy or girl. You know, not all guys, women, etc. You know, not everybody has those positions and places. Yah makes each and every one of us different. And he says that's for a purpose. So not everybody's going to be up here teaching. Not everybody wants to be up here teaching. But you know what? Maybe you're not one who necessarily likes speaking and being the speaker, but Yah wants you to be that person. And he wants to grow you into that person, just like he did Moses. And maybe he's challenging you to be up here, to be a leader. Or maybe he's challenging you to step out of the comfort zone that you normally have, to be a different person for him. And of course, each and every one of us, he calls to be a light, which naturally means that when you're a light, everybody looks at you, right? If you're the one blinking, eventually everybody looks to you. You know, when you go to a four-way intersection in a major city, you want to look at the light, right? Because it's going to tell you what's going on and keep you from being harmed. When you're a light, that's what you are. You want to be someone that people look at, a beacon. A lighthouse is something that sailors look for because it keeps them from harm. And each and every one of us, because we have knowledge of what God has done in our lives, is to be a beacon, a light of hope to others in a dark world. Some of us, that's easy. I don't think Bill ever had a struggle ever being able to talk to people. And some of you don't know Bill very much, but those of us from Solel know him quite well. And Bill doesn't have a problem talking. That's anything. He can talk to, well, I don't know, brick wall, or the king of. He would go into Pharaoh's house with no problem. He's like, God, okay, I'm ready. Let's go. Totally different. But others of us are like scared as all get out to say 2 words to other people. And what I just hope that comes out from the understanding of Abraham and faith is that we have faith in God. God can take all our fears away. Perfect love casts out fear. Everybody say that. Perfect love casts out fear. Scripture tells us this. Does that mean the fears I have of people or of things or issues or the world or what's going to happen in the world? Can He take all those fears away and give us life in its place and hope and strength and courage to go out and to do things for Him? And this is a little bit of a bunny trail on my notes, but like, even with the kind of a lot of people who are like, I want to run out to the wilderness and hide because of what's going to happen in the future. And if you believe in that concept with the coming in times and things like this, can God not protect us in the city, in the middle of the disaster and all the tribulation? Can He not do that? Yes. I believe He can. And I believe He, just like the children of Israel coming out of the land of Egypt, there was armies coming after them that were going to destroy them. They had every right to fear what was going to happen. But Yah protected them and brought them out of that situation. And it says that in the end times, the second Exodus will be so big that the first one will be forgotten about. And yet every time we come together and we celebrate the feast, what do we remember right now? The first Exodus. And we are all excited about the first Exodus. And yet, when that comes, we're going to forget about it? That's how big the second Exodus is going to be. And how great and mighty God is going to show His hand in this world. Amen. So let's remember that when we begin to get scared. When we begin to fear. And I know that we all have fears. When I was younger, I hated to speak in public. I really did. And I did not like to be in front of people. I got my first chance to do preaching in front of a congregation when I was 16 at a teen event. And I was petrified. I even grew up going around and singing in churches in front of every time. It was horrible. Did not like it. Parents made me do it. It's so mean. Parents were so rude sometimes. But they made me do it because they knew better than I did what I needed to do. And they loved me and they wanted me to get out of my comfort zone. And then I went off to college and I had to do speeches. How many like speeches? Okay, come on, folks. Sorry. Now, I'm being serious. Don't raise your hand if you don't like them, okay? Be honest. But also pay attention. Do you like doing speeches? And not very many. That's pretty much typical, right? Out of a room of 100 people, 90 you're probably not going to raise their hand if they like speeches. Maybe 10. The 10 are all going to be up here. They're going to be the ones teaching classes and doing stuff like that. Because we don't like being up in front of people and speaking and doing things. And most of us don't have that opportunity. You know? But we'll never know if we are capable of doing this unless we allow God to try us and to change us. I know people who are scared to go out of their front door. You ever met anybody like that? They don't want to ever leave their home because they're scared. Fear cripples us. And then, what if you don't like, I'm trying to think of, say there's a food you don't like and you're really scared, or bugs. I don't like bugs.
Spiders.
Spiders. Yes. Don't like bugs, right? But what would happen if your child was stuck somewhere and there were spiders between you and helping your child to get out of a dangerous situation? Would you break through the spiders to go help your child? I know people that wouldn't, right? You probably would understand this. How many of you don't like heights? Okay, I don't like heights, okay, I'll be honest, I am not a height guy. I like terra firma and my feet planted firmly on it. But that has not stopped me from at times challenging myself to do things that I wouldn't like. I've been on top of both the World Trade Towers. You know, one of the craziest things I can do as a story is I sat down on a bench that was, the wall of glass was like right here, and I saw a helicopter fly under me in between the buildings. So that tells you how tall you are, you know. And I've been on roller coasters and things like this. Believe me, you can ask my family, I do not like heights. I don't like bridges and stuff like that. But I went to the base of the Grand Canyon, which was one of the greatest experiences of my life, to back up again. On walkways that were this far with a 1,000-foot drop and no guardrails. Very bad for people. But that, if I had not done that, I would have lost a great experience that molded and changed and tweaked a little bit of who I am. And what it showed me what I could do. That's what Moses had to learn. At first, he was challenged by God to do something. He's like, nope, not going to do it. That's not me. But Yah didn't believe him where he was at. Yah didn't throw him off the cliff and say, hope you can fly. That's not what God does either. But he challenges us if we're willing to take baby steps to grow and mature our lives. So Yehovah takes this man who's scared to do anything and tries to make up every excuse not to do anything. And he says, come on, I'll help you. Let's go. And the first thing he says is he reassures Moses in doubting by saying that he's going to make Moses like a god to Pharaoh. And in Exodus chapter 7 and verses 1 and 2, it says, see, I have made you as God to Pharaoh, and Aaron your brother shall be your prophet. You shall speak all that I command you, and Aaron your brother shall tell Pharaoh to send the children of Israel out of this land. So baby step number 1. You're going to be like a god to Pharaoh. That's pretty nice, you know. Okay, I can do that. And you don't even have to speak. You just got to stand there, Moses. And Aaron's going to do all the work for you right now. So Moses says, okay, I'm going to go before Pharaoh. Just in case anybody doesn't remember, Pharaoh is probably his brother, his stepbrother, remember, who he grew up with his whole life. And so, can you imagine going and seeing your stepbrother after 40 years and telling him, you're wrong and I'm right? That'd be a pretty intense circumstance. But God does this first thing and gives them this reassurance. I'm going to make you like a god before Pharaoh. Moses was commanded to speak, but Aaron was doing all the work. So we go from not doing anything and Moses did everything to bringing him up before Pharaoh to now Moses is going to speak and Aaron's going to still do all the miracles. In Exodus 7:19 it says, then Yehovah spoke to Moses, say to Aaron, take your rod and stretch out your hand over the waters of Egypt, over the streams, over their rivers, over their ponds, and over all their pools of water, that they may become blood. And there shall be blood throughout all the land of Egypt, both in buckets of wood and pitchers of stone. So we see here that Aaron was doing all the miracles, but Moses was the one who was speaking. We go on down further in Exodus 9, verses 22 and 23. It says, then Yehovah said to Moses, stretch out your hand toward heaven, that there may be hail in all the land of Egypt, on man, on beast, and on every herb of the field throughout the land of Egypt. And Moses stretched out his rod toward heaven, and Yehovah sent thunder and hail, and fire darted to the ground. And Yehovah rained hail on the land of Egypt. So we get from Moses doing nothing and Aaron doing it all, to Moses going forward and Aaron still being the key guy, to Moses speaking and Aaron doing the miracles, to now Moses is doing both the speaking and the miracles. So we see this process that God is slowly leading Moses through. Moses, you can do this. Okay, now you've done that. Now I'm going to bring you a little further. And you're going to do this. Okay, now you've done that. Now we're going to bring you a little further. till I get you to where I need you to be the man of God that I need you to be the leader of my people. So Moses is doing all the miracles. If we go on a little bit further, Exodus 10, verses 12 and 13, he says to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the land of Egypt for the locusts, that they may come upon the land of Egypt, and eat every herb of the land and all that the hail has left." So Moses stretched out his rod, stretched out his rod over the land of Egypt, and Jehovah brought an east wind on the land and all the day and all the night. When it was morning, the east wind brought the locusts. So again, who's doing all the miracles now? Is it Aaron? No, it's Moses. Moses is grown, and God is in this whole process of the Ten Commandments and going before Pharaoh, is steadily been growing him and maturing him. Never leaving him there by himself, not expecting him to go from point A to point B as super fast, but living in an incremental growth. At the end of his life, Moses is working with Joshua, who's the second in command. And God says you're going to need to pick a new man to take over the children of Israel for you, if you're not going into the promised land. And Moses looks around, he sees Joshua, a faithful servant. And Moses looks to Joshua and he says, Joshua, in the sight of all Israel, be strong and of good courage. We see the full 360 growth of Moses in this whole situation. From a man who is nervous and fearful to growing into a man of God, to at the end of this whole situation, he's bringing up the next generation and telling him, be strong and of good courage. And in this whole time, he's been the mentor to this young man. He's been the one who's instilling what God has instilled to him into the next generation of leadership. Down a little bit further in verse 8, it says, and Jehovah says, He is the one who goes before you. Speaking of Joshua, He will be with you. He will not leave you nor forsake you. Do not fear nor be dismayed. Excuse me, I messed that up. Moses tells Joshua, Jehovah, He is the one who goes before you. He will be with you. He will leave you nor forsake you. Do not fear nor be dismayed. And so what Moses had been learning and God had taught him through his 40 years of leadership, he's been steadily instilling in Joshua the next generation of leadership. And so we see that Moses started out, and the one thing that he had to do, he had one job, one thing he had to do in this whole process. And that's all that any of us have to do, is we have to be willing. We have to be willing. That's the first step. If we're willing, God will not leave us stranded. God will not start something and then go somewhere else. If we allow Him to work in us, if we allow Him to show us open doors and closed doors, and if we hear His Spirit and walk in His paths, then He can take away those fears. It may not be instantaneous. It may not be right away. All of a sudden I'm not afraid of heights. Still afraid of heights. I really am. But I've done a lot that God has allowed me to go and do these things and to experience things I would never experience if I allowed my fear to captivate me and hold me where I was at. So he faithfully went before Pharaoh. He faithfully also went to Jehovah when he needed provision. So you have to have a willingness to allow God to direct and guide you, but you also need to know where to go when struggles happen and things happen in life that may derail your growth in spiritual maturity. In Hebrews chapter 11, verse 27, it says, or 28, it says, by faith Moses kept the Passover and the sprinkling of blood, lest he who destroyed the firstborn should touch them. And then it goes on in verse 29 about the Red Sea. It says, by faith they passed through the Red Sea as by dry land, whereas the Egyptians attempting to do so were drowned. And so here we see in these two instances that the process of Moses' growth, that his faith is what's leading the children of Israel on. So God has instilled in him faith that he's now imparting to the children of Israel. Because we all know that they were fearful too, right? And they had a lot of fear in this whole section here. Going on to looking at as far as provision, 10 times in the wilderness, we see that there were times that he had to go before God and ask for provisions for the children of Israel. Just a few of them. There was the bitter water at Marah that he had to go and ask for provision. There was no water at Rephidim, and he had to go and ask for provision. There was the complaining of the children of Israel at Taberah, and he had to go and ask for provision. Manna, the going up against the various enemies of Israel when they're in the wilderness. You name it. He had to go before God and ask for provision to save the people of Israel. And so when we are left in our fear, if we're willing and we're struggling with fear, the next thing we need to understand is we need to go before God and ask him for the provision of strength and courage to overcome that fear. Third, he listens to the advice of others. A lot of times, that if we have a wrong spirit in ourselves, it makes it difficult to listen to the advice of others. Along came his father-in-law, Jethro, who comes into the camps, hasn't seen him for too long, 20, maybe 10 years, I don't know. It doesn't really tell us how long it's been since they've seen each other. And then Jethro, he's looking around, they greet each other, they have a wonderful party, they welcome dad, father-in-law, welcome wife, kids, etc., etc. And at the end of it, Moses goes out and is doing his job. But he's exhausted, he's suffering as all the people are bringing all their problems to him. And Jethro's seeing this and is like, Moses, come here, son. And I've been doing this leadership thing for a while. I think you should do this. And lays out this whole plan about how to get help. He says, what you're doing is wrong. You're going to wear yourself out. And you're not going to be worthy of being a leader of the people after a short amount of time. You need to do this. Moses could have looked and said, psh, God appointed me leader, not you, buddy. That's what he could have done. But he listened to wise counsel. The Bible clearly states over and over again we're to listen to wise counsel. And this father-in-law had given him great counsel. And so he sat there and he said, okay, you're right. How do I do this, Dad? Help me out. Give me some ideas on how to install this. And so they went through and the Bible says this is how he did it, and put it all into place, and boom, everything runs a whole lot more efficiently. And he even goes on to say that Yah was pleased with this. So listen to advice from wise counsel. Don't turn it away. When you have those who love you and care for you and are trying to share with you how to grow and how to mature, and they've given you scriptural understanding, listen to it and grow with it. Don't turn it away. Fourthly, he loved the people more than himself. He loved the people more than himself. That doesn't mean he always liked them, though. In Numbers chapter 14, verses 1 through 5, it talks about all the congregation. It says, all the congregation lifted up their voices and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron. The whole congregation said to them, if only we had died in the land of Egypt, or if only we had died in the wilderness. Why has Jehovah brought us to this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and children should become victims? Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt? So they said to one another, let us select a leader and return to Egypt. Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly of the congregation of the children of Israel. This is dealing with the time when the children of Israel were looking and scouting the land, and the spies would come back and giving the bad report, and all the people are like, we should have died in Egypt. It's so terrible. This is awful. Remember, this is just the start. This isn't like the end of the wilderness adventure. This is the beginning, folks. They hadn't done all the problems. All they had seen so far is God work miracle after miracle and keeping them alive and protecting them to this point in time. They'd seen Mount Sinai at this time and all the wonderful things there. And they're supposed to go on the land, and they balk at it. And not only that, but they look at Moses and say, "You're the one who's the problem. Look what you've done to us." And they go, "Guys, we're going to find someone, a new leader who's going to take us back to Egypt." And what was Moses' response? He fell down on his face before Yah, and he pleaded for the people. That was his response. It wasn't anger and animosity back at the other. It wasn't, "I hate you all. Go back to Egypt, you big worthless lot." You know, that would have been probably what most of us would have done. I would assume. You know, it takes a lot of God pouring himself into us to do what Moses did. And it explains the humility that Moses had learned by this point in time from God's steady training and teaching of him. Now, let's compare that to some other points in Moses' life. In Exodus 16:20, it says, "Notwithstanding, they did not heed Moses, but some of them left part of it until morning." This is speaking of the manna. "And the manna bred worms and stink. And Moses was angry with them." All right? Moses is angry at them in this one. Leviticus 10:16. "Then Moses made careful inquiry about the goat of the sin offering, and there it was, burned up." This is speaking about the sons of Aaron who had gone and screwed up the process of the goat of offering in Yom Kippur. And Moses comes and goes, "Where's the sin offering? It's not supposed to be done yet. What are you doing?" And they go, "Well, we burned it up on accident. Sorry, Moses." And it says that Moses was angry with Eleazar and Ithamar, the sons of Aaron, who were left. So we see anger. Number 31:14. "But Moses was angry with the officers of the army, with the captains over thousands and captains over hundreds, who had come from the battle." This one was a battle, and God had told Moses that when you go, you're supposed to wipe them all out, kill everyone. And they decided, well, these ladies are pretty nice looking and stuff. Why don't we bring them back? They could be slaves, and the children could be slaves and stuff, and we'll bring them back with us. And Moses says, "You're supposed to kill everyone." And he was angry with them. Now, why was he angry with them, folks?
Because prior to that, they had just experienced the situation of Balaam and Balak, and the women of Canaan had caused the men to go.
Yeah. So Balak and Balaam says, why don't you get them to intermix with the Midianites and worship their gods and stuff at the feast table and stuff. And when that happens, then God will have to judge them. And he did. And the key, though, is he wiped out a huge bunch of them because they had done this. So Moses is angry. He's like, guys, you brought all these ladies back, and now you're going to lose 20,000 of your own countrymen because God's going to wipe them out for your sin. That's why he's angry at all these times. It's like, don't you get it? People, don't you get it? And he gets angry with them. But with righteous anger because of what they're doing. Korah, Numbers chapter 16, verse 15. Then Moses was very angry and said to Jehovah, do not respect their offering. I have not taken one donkey from them, nor have I hurt one of them. Smiting the rock, Numbers 20. And Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock, and he said to them, hear now, you rebels, must we bring water for you out of this rock? Then Moses lifted his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod, and water came out abundantly, and the congregation and their animals drank. So, just in case you think Moses was perfect, Moses got angry too. He loved the people, but he didn't always like them, did he? Nor did they actually deserve to be liked all the time. My point of that is sometimes brothers and sisters in Messiah get angry at each other. And a lot of times there is chafing that happens. Just as the scriptures talks about iron sharpens iron. Okay, a lot of people speak of that about challenging each other with theological issues and midrashing together. But it also is the fact that when you scrape each of them together, you're scraping off the bad bits. You're scraping off all the rough edges. And God uses each of us with each other to smooth and hone us, to grow us spiritually. If we're willing to let him. If we are like Moses, who was angry, but he didn't take out his anger on everybody and go and start, punching people or anything, or go, fine, I'm done with you, and walk away, because his love was greater than his anger. And so even when those situations brought chafing, it still was love that kept him there and kept him renewing the relationship between him and the people, and between God and the people. And that's how we should be as brothers and sisters in Messiah. When we have problems with one another, it's not a time to go and say, fine, I'm done with you. That doesn't show love. That doesn't show that we're brothers and sisters. But it's the time that we need to go and deal with the conflict and allow those rough edges to be knocked off of each of us. Whenever the congregation or individuals came up that were going to inflict harm on the congregation, even though Moses got angry with them, it's usually his first and primary response was to fall on his face before Jehovah and plead for those people. Whenever we may have issues between one another as in the body of Messiah, let us remember that. And in humility, fall on our faces before Yah and ask for forgiveness for those people. Because it is only by what we, each individual, does in our own actions and how we act in that situation that can change how that situation is going to turn out. I can't change the other person and what they're doing and saying. I can only change myself. And so therefore I must fall before the Almighty God. And if I am right, and I'm just in what I'm doing, and I fall down, it doesn't matter. Pray for that other person to also have the opportunity to have their eyes open and Yah work in their lives to make change too. And so we see that Moses didn't always like the people, but he loved them. He was humble before God, and he sought to take care of those people because he loved them. He didn't want them to be all destroyed. He wanted God to be happy with his people and love them and show his love for them. And so whenever they did these evil things, he interceded on their behalf. Through the working of Jehovah in his life, Moses was transformed from a self-centered introvert into a humble, compassionate, willing man of God. By faith, he believed Jehovah's word, and by it, in itty-bitty baby steps, he had his life changed from a wandering outlaw to the greatest historic leader of the children of Israel, a man who talks with God. And if we are willing, each of us is willing like him, Yah can take each and every one of us and change us from cowering fools to humble and willing servants for his kingdom. Amen. All it takes is the willingness to trust God that he can change us and by faith make us like his son. Shabbat shalom.